My name is Margot Llewellyn, and I used to believe that growing old meant growing loved. I thought the lines on my face would earn me respect, the kind that comes from years of sacrifice, of raising a child, of staying silent when it was easier to scream. But I was wrong. In this house, my wrinkles only made me easier to ignore or destroy. When my son Daniel married Claire, I welcomed her with open arms. I gave them my savings, sold off my jewelry, and even signed over half the ownership of the little house my late husband built with his bare hands. I believed they'd take care of me. I believed I had a home. What I got was hell. The first time Claire slapped me, I was folding laundry. She didn't like how I placed her silk blouse. "You wrinkled it," which, she said, then raised her hand and struck me. "You do it again, I'll make sure your other hand can't move." She made good on her promise. The next time, she kicked my wrist so hard it turned purple and swelled up like a balloon. When I begged Daniel to take me to the clinic, he muttered, "Don't exaggerate, Mom. You're always trying to make her look bad." From that day, Claire stopped pretending. Every morning, she yanked off my bedsheets, poured cold water on me, and screamed, "Get up, old hag. This isn't a retirement home. You're here to work." She gave me one meal a day. If I was lucky, it was leftovers. On most days, she made me watch her throw the food into the trash, smirking. "Dogs eat better than you because they're useful," she'd whisper in my ear. Once, I got pneumonia. I was coughing up blood, trembling with fever. Claire didn't even call the doctor. She dumped me outside the emergency room like a stray. I lay in the cold on a plastic bench for 4 hours alone. No ID. No money. Nothing. The nurse told me, "Your son says he can't afford your treatment. Do you have anyone else?" Anyone else? No. I didn't. I lay there thinking maybe this was the end. That maybe dying would be better than begging my own blood to treat me like a human. But then, a letter came. A man I'd never met left me something that would change everything. I won't spoil the twist, not yet. But listen closely, my dear viewers. If you've ever been cast aside, if your own family made you feel like nothing, then don't blink. Don't skip this story. Because the day I rose from the ashes, I became their reckoning. I had just come back from the emergency room, limping. My body was bruised and swollen, my breath short, my heart empty. Claire didn't open the door when I knocked. She let me sit on the cold stone steps of the porch for 3 hours. By the time she let me in, it was only because the neighbors had started staring. Her words cut deeper than any blade. "Next time, just die there. You're making our house smell like poverty." Daniel didn't even look up from his phone. I slept in the basement that night. No blanket. No heater. It was damp, moldy, and smelled of old paint. Claire had shoved my mattress into a corner beside the washer, like I was one of the appliances. I used a rolled-up towel as a pillow. I cried quietly, like I always did. But that night, I wasn't crying for them, I was crying because I'd started to believe them. And then it came. The next morning, while Claire and Daniel were out, a letter arrived. It was slid through the mail slot, sealed with wax, something almost ceremonial. The envelope was thick and cream-colored, the name written in elegant cursive. Ms. Margot Llewellyn. I stared at it for several minutes, afraid to touch it. No one ever sent me anything. The only mail I ever received were utility bills that Claire made me pay with my own disability check. With trembling hands, I opened it. It read, "Dear Ms. Llewellyn, you do not know me, but I knew your late husband, Henry. We served together in the Navy over 40 years ago. He once saved my life during a brutal storm off the Baltic Sea. I made him a promise. If anything ever happened to him, and you were ever in need, I would be there for you. That time has come. Enclosed is a contact and key to a property in Sussex. Everything there is now legally yours. Please come. Yours in honor, Elias Thurston." I dropped the letter. Was it real? Or some cruel prank? My heart raced. My hands shook. For the first time in years, I felt something I had forgotten existed. Hope. But as I picked up the key and read the address scrawled at the bottom, a sudden fear washed over me. If Claire or Daniel found out, they would take it from me, just like they took everything else. I did the only thing I could. I hid it. I slid the letter inside the lining of my old coat and stitched it shut by hand. I tucked the key into my bra, the only place they never checked. And that night, while Claire screamed about the soup being too cold and threw the bowl at my head, I smiled for the first time in months. Because I knew a secret. I was no longer trapped. I just needed a plan. But little did I know, Claire had secrets too. And she was watching me more closely than I realized. The physical pain was easy to explain, a bruise here, a swollen lip there. I'd gotten good at covering them with foundation stolen from Claire's makeup drawer when she wasn't home. What I couldn't cover were the wounds she left inside me. The kind no bandage or concealer could hide. That morning, I walked into the kitchen, trying to keep my head down. Claire was already there, sipping coffee like a queen, one leg crossed over the other, perfectly manicured nails tapping on her phone screen. She didn't look up when she said it. "You were smiling in your sleep, Margot. Did a rat crawl into your dreams and die laughing?" I froze. She saw me. Somehow she knew. I had smiled last night, just a little, in the dark, clutching the secret key beneath my blouse. I hadn't even realized it showed on my face. But Claire? Claire missed nothing. I mumbled something and shuffled toward the sink to start the dishes. That's when she stood. "You're hiding something," she whispered, her voice like ice wrapped in velvet. "You think I don't see the way your eyes changed? You're not allowed to hope. Understand that." Then, without warning, she grabbed the ceramic butter dish and smashed it against my arm. The pain was sharp and immediate, but I didn't cry out. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. "You're bleeding," she said calmly, sipping her coffee again. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before trying to outsmart me." Daniel walked in 5 minutes later, saw the mess, saw my blood. And do you know what he said? "Mom, please stop making drama. Claire has enough stress as it is." My own son. The boy I fed when I had nothing but soup bones and rainwater. The boy who once cried when I scraped my knee in the garden. He didn't even blink. Later that afternoon, while Claire was on a phone call, flirting with someone who definitely wasn't my son, I snuck into the garage and found the old duffel bag I used when Daniel was in college. I stuffed it with a few clothes, the small stash of coins I had hidden in the hollow base of a flower vase, and my husband's photo. I held Henry's face in my hands and whispered, "It's happening, love. I'm getting out. I'm coming back to life." But just as I was zipping the bag, I heard it. The unmistakable click of a camera. I turned. Claire stood at the top of the steps, holding her phone, recording. Well, she sneered. "Plotting a little escape, are we?" And then she said the thing that chilled my bones more than anything she'd ever done. "Let's see how the police feel about a crazy old woman trying to steal from us." That's when I realized something horrifying. She wasn't just cruel. She was preparing to destroy me legally, socially, financially. I was the villain in the story she was writing. But that was her mistake. Because I'd already started writing my own. And in mine, she would beg. She uploaded the video within minutes. Claire always worked fast when it came to cruelty. The clip was short, me kneeling in the garage, stuffing clothes into a duffel bag, looking frantic. No sound, no context, just visual poison. Daniel saw it that night. He didn't ask. He didn't speak. He didn't even blink. He grabbed my arm so tight I thought it would snap and dragged me into the living room like a criminal. Claire followed, smug and silent, holding her phone like it was a weapon, and she was ready to pull the trigger. She was stealing from us, Claire said coolly, tossing the phone onto the couch. Planning to run off with God knows what. Probably the silverware. Or maybe those checks from the charity box. Charity box? What box? I opened my mouth to defend myself, but Daniel's voice cut through mine. "I'm ashamed of you, Mom." Those words, they weren't just a slap, they were a blade. And he twisted it. I tried to speak, tried to explain that I was only packing clothes, that I was trying to survive. But Claire beat me to it again. "You're lucky I'm not calling the police," she sneered, arms crossed, watching me like a lioness watches a wounded animal. "We could press charges. You know that, right? Elderly or not, theft is theft." The next part broke me. Daniel handed me a pen and a piece of paper. "Sign this," he said. "It's a declaration that you admit what you did. It protects us in case things get worse." I looked at him. Really looked at him. His face, his eyes, his voice, it was like staring at a stranger. The little boy who used to fall asleep on my lap, who once drew pictures of me with a crown and the words "Queen Mommy" in crayon, he was gone. I refused to sign. So Claire took matters into her own hands. She made a scene. She cried, shouted, and told the neighbors I was senile. Said I'd become unstable. That she was trying her best to take care of me, but I was hurting the family. She even accused me of stealing her jewelry, a lie so vicious, so bold, it made my stomach churn. 2 days later, a social worker showed up. She asked me cold, rehearsed questions. "Do you know where you are, Margot? Can you remember what day it is? Do you know who the president is?" Claire hovered behind her, lips pursed, arms folded, like she was the one being interrogated. I answered every question calmly, clearly. But I saw the flicker in the woman's eyes. The doubt Claire had planted was already sprouting. The next day, I found my medication bottle emptied. Claire smirked when I looked at her. "Don't worry, I'll call the pharmacy, eventually." They were building a paper trail. A fake story where I was dangerous, delusional, and soon to be institutionalized. And once I was locked away, they'd sell the house. Sell my memories. Sell me. But there was one thing they didn't know. The property in Sussex? It wasn't just some old man's shack. It was a fortune. And I had already sent a letter back to Elias Thurston. I was going to disappear. But not quietly. It was 4 a.m. when I walked out. No goodbye. No note. No shoes. Claire had drunk too much wine the night before, laughing at some cruel video on her phone, and Daniel had passed out with his face in a bowl of nachos. That night, I slept on the floor behind the washing machine to avoid more accusations. But I hadn't really slept. I was waiting. When their breathing deepened and the house turned silent, I grabbed the duffel bag I had repacked a dozen times in my mind. One dress, one pair of socks, Henry's photo, and the key. I opened the door slowly, careful not to let the hinges creak. My heartbeat was loud, almost louder than the wind outside. Every step felt like a rebellion. My joints ached, my ankles trembled, but I moved like a shadow down the driveway. The air outside was cold. It bit through my clothes like Claire's words used to. But I didn't stop. I took the night bus from Whitestone to the countryside. My fingers were trembling, my lips cracked, but my soul was starting to come back to life. I stared out the window the entire way, watching the city fade behind me like a nightmare at sunrise. By the time I arrived in Sussex, I had been awake for nearly 30 hours. I followed the map Elias included in his letter and walked the final 2 miles, down a gravel road lined with fog and trees older than the country. And then I saw it. A massive iron gate. Vines wrapped around its edges like the fingers of time itself. Beyond it, a mansion. Real. Solid. Not a fantasy. A woman with silver hair and a brown coat opened the gate before I knocked. "You must be Margot," she said warmly. "Mr. Thurston said you might come. He left everything to you." "Everything?" She handed me a folder. Deeds, bank statements, photos of the estate, and a will signed and witnessed that transferred millions into my name. Millions. I sat down on the steps of that grand old house and sobbed like a child. Not because I was rich, but because, for the first time in decades, I was free. But back in Whitestone, chaos erupted. When I didn't answer my phone, Claire started pacing. When I didn't respond to her texts, she began searching the house. By noon, she was screaming at Daniel to call the police. And when she called the hospitals, expecting to find me dead or detained, and they told her no one by my name had been admitted, that's when she panicked. I was gone. Without warning. Without permission. And that terrified her more than any slap she'd ever given me. She lost control, and soon she would lose everything else. I knew it would only be a matter of time before Claire's fake empire of lies began to crack. People like her, they build their lives like glass castles, beautiful on the outside, but fragile, hollow, and dangerous when shattered. By the time I had a fire going in the Sussex estate's hearth and a blanket around my shoulders, Claire was already in a spiral. She started calling neighbors, pretending to be concerned. "If you see my mother-in-law, please call me. She's been unstable lately. She left without her medication. We're just really worried about her mental health." Worried? She was worried her house slave had escaped. She was worried I might talk. She was worried I might matter again. But I wasn't about to talk. No, I was going to let the truth speak louder than her lies. I hired a lawyer the very next morning. Her name was Eleanor Fitch, a sharp, eagle-eyed woman with no tolerance for injustice. When I showed her the bruises, the photos, the hospital records I'd secretly collected, she leaned back in her chair, lips pressed thin with rage. "You want to press charges?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. "First, I want her to crumble under her own weight. Because revenge isn't about shouting. It's about silence. Strategic silence. A silence that creeps into your abuser's mind and makes them question every corner, every shadow, every phone call." So I did nothing. I waited. And it worked. Claire began to lose sleep. She called Daniel's office 10 times a day, asking if I had contacted him. She searched pawn shops thinking I'd sold her missing jewelry. She even filed a report with the police, trying to accuse me of running off with stolen goods. But here's the thing. I didn't need to defend myself anymore. Because her real problem was already brewing, online. One of the neighbors, a sweet older woman named Ruth who used to slip me apples through the fence, posted something on the local community forum. "Has anyone seen Margot Llewellyn? I noticed bruises on her face last week, and now she's gone. I'm worried something bad happened." And just like that, questions spread like wildfire. People remembered seeing me limping. People remembered Claire yelling at me in the driveway. Someone even shared a clip of Claire screaming, "Next time you collapse, don't bother coming back." Suddenly, Claire's version of the story didn't seem so clean anymore. And Daniel? He started getting strange looks at work. A client pulled him aside. "Your mother's name came up in the paper. Something about elder abuse? Is everything okay?" He laughed it off, but inside, I knew he was unraveling too. Good. Let them feel what it's like to be doubted. Let them feel exposed. But the best part? They still didn't know I had money. Not just money, power. Power to buy. Power to sell. Power to ruin reputations. Power to lift up my voice after they spent years silencing me. And soon, they were going to hear it. Every last word. You should have seen her face when the package arrived. Of course, I wasn't there. But I heard everything from the private courier I hired to deliver it, right to her front door, with signature required. Claire always loved to act high and mighty in front of strangers, and that day was no different. She answered the door in her silk robe and fake designer slippers, pretending she hadn't been unraveling for days. "What's this?" she asked the courier, her tone snobbish. He simply smiled. "Delivery from Sussex. Special request. Personal." She signed. Inside the box was a single velvet pouch. And inside the pouch was her wedding ring. The one she had pawned behind Daniel's back last year and replaced with a fake. I had found the real one tucked away in her old purse when I was scrubbing their floors last winter. I had taken it, partly out of spite, partly because I knew it would one day come in handy. With the ring, I included a note. Handwritten. Clean. Simple. "You always said I had no value. But I held on to the one thing you thought you could throw away. This is just the beginning. Margot. I was told she went completely still when she read it. No screams. No curse words. No threats. Just silence. That's how you know a predator smells a bigger predator. Later that evening, Daniel tried to call me. I let it ring. Again. And again. I didn't answer. He sent a text. Mom, please. We need to talk. Where are you? Are you okay? Oh, now he cares? I took a screenshot. For the lawyers. Then I blocked his number. Meanwhile, Eleanor, my lawyer, had already filed the first batch of paperwork requesting the release of medical records and hospital footage from the night I was dumped like garbage. We had proof, timestamps, nurses' statements. We were building a case strong enough to snap their reputations in half. But I wasn't finished. I went one step further. That night, I posted a message under an anonymous profile on the same community forum where Ruth had started the conversation. Elder abuse is real. I was beaten, starved, and left in a hospital hallway to die. My abusers smiled in public and called me unstable in private. But now I'm free. And soon, the truth will be louder than their lies. It went viral overnight. People guessed it was me. They started commenting. I always wondered why Margot looked so weak. Claire always gave me bad vibes. They'll get what they deserve. The court of public opinion had opened its doors. And Claire? She was about to stand trial. Not just in front of a judge, but in front of everyone. The truth spreads faster than fire when the matches are soaked in silence and rage. The next morning, I sat by the window of my Sussex estate, sipping tea brewed from chamomile and calm vengeance, while my laptop buzzed with notifications. Hundreds of them. The post had exploded. By midday, it was reposted across neighborhood watch groups, elder rights forums, and even picked up by a small news blog called The Silent Sufferers, which focused on stories of hidden abuse. And although I never named Claire or Daniel, everyone knew. The whispers started at the grocery store first. She used to yell at her in public, remember? That poor old woman, Margot, wasn't it? She always looked like she hadn't eaten in days. I thought Claire was just strict. But this is monstrous. Claire's kingdom, the one she ruled with a flawless Instagram smile and carefully curated lies, began to crumble. Vendors stopped answering her calls. The boutique she modeled handbags for removed her photos. Even the yoga studio she loved so much canceled her membership. Too much bad press, they said. And Daniel? He got worse. His clients backed away from projects. A business partner quietly withdrew from their startup, citing ethical misalignment. Emails dried up. Voicemails went unreturned. Then came the local paper. A journalist, young, persistent, and disgusted by the story, ran a column titled When Silence Bleeds, The Case of Margot Llewellyn. It didn't use my full name, but it used enough. An elderly woman in Whitestone was found abandoned in a hospital with untreated injuries. Allegations of long-term domestic abuse. Police involvement pending. People started putting flowers at my old fence. Neighbors who never said a word when I was crawling through the garden now left notes that read, "I'm sorry I didn't speak up. You deserved better. We see you now." Claire lost it. She showed up at the police station trying to report me for theft again. Claimed I had stolen money, jewelry, her peace of mind. But this time, the officer didn't just nod and write down her words. He leaned in and said, "Ma'am, we're investigating you." She stormed out in tears. Daniel tried to post a statement online, a pathetic, hollow apology. Something about misunderstandings and false narratives and deep concern for my mother's well-being. But it backfired. The comments section tore him apart. Where were you when she needed you? You let your wife torture your own mother. Monster. If this was your version of care, you should be behind bars. Meanwhile, I made no public appearances. No interviews. I remained silent. Because silence is powerful when it comes from someone who once had no voice. Let them stew. Let the town turn. Let them feel the walls close in. This was only the beginning. My next move would destroy the illusion of control they still clung to. Do you know what they say about abusers? They never expect their victims to fight back because they mistake kindness for weakness. Claire thought I was done the moment I walked out that door. She thought I was running away, hiding. But I wasn't running. I was regrouping. And now it was time to take back everything they had stolen. The house, my house, had been left to Daniel and Claire, but only verbally. Legally, the ownership was still under my name. When Henry passed away, I had never completed the transfer. I was grieving, vulnerable, and Claire told me, "We're family. No need for messy paperwork, Ma." I believed her. Until now. With Eleanor's help, I filed a legal claim to reclaim full ownership. The property records were clear. The utilities, taxes, and even maintenance had all been charged to my old accounts. They had never changed the paperwork, too lazy, too confident I'd just die and leave it to them. So I took it back. We served them the notice on a Sunday. I made sure of it. I wanted it to land in their hands while they were still in their pajamas, sipping coffee from the mugs I once washed. The eviction letter was hand-delivered by a sheriff. By order of the county, the current residents of 14 Weeping Birch Lane must vacate the premises within 30 days or face forcible removal. All utilities and legal rights are being returned to the original type holder, Margot Llewellyn. Claire screamed. She tore the paper in half, then into quarters, then into shreds that floated like snowflakes around her. But the law doesn't care about tantrums. Daniel was pale, speechless. And for the first time since I left that house, I felt tall again. I visited the property 2 days later, not to reclaim furniture, not to take photos. I came to stand on the front lawn, quietly, to feel what it meant to take your life back. Claire was at the upstairs window. She saw me. She didn't wave. She didn't yell. She backed away, slowly, like a ghost retreating into the shadows. I didn't need to speak. The papers had spoken for me. But before I left, I did one thing. I nailed a sign to the front gate, simple, hand-painted, impossible to ignore. This home no longer accepts cruelty as payment. M.L. The neighbors applauded, literally applauded. One woman offered me her coat. A young man said, "You're an inspiration, ma'am." My grandma went through something similar. And for the first time in years, I felt like a person. Not a punching bag. Not a servant. Not a shameful burden. I was Margot Llewellyn, owner of my past, commander of my future. And I wasn't done yet. Next, I would make them feel what it was like to beg. It was 2:14 a.m. when the call came. The kind of hour where nightmares blur into memories, and every ring of the phone feels like a scream from your past. I was awake, sitting by the fireplace in my Sussex home, sipping warm milk and reading the letter Henry had written me during his last deployment. I hadn't read it in years, not because I forgot it, but because I wasn't strong enough, until now. The phone lit up. Claire. I didn't reject it. I didn't answer right away, either. I let it ring, and ring, and ring. Then I picked up. Margot. Her voice was barely a whisper, cracked and trembling. Please, please don't hang up. I didn't say a word. I didn't mean for it to get so bad. We were struggling. I took it out on you, and it was wrong. I see that now. Everyone's turned against us. Daniel might lose his job. The neighbors, the investors, they think I'm a monster. I almost laughed. Almost. You are a monster, I said softly. Silence. Then a sniffle. A shaky inhale. I know I was horrible. But you were always so strong, so quiet, I didn't think you'd ever. I didn't think you'd fight back. You didn't think I could. I corrected her. She broke down then. Real sobbing. The kind that makes your face twist and your shoulders shake. If I didn't know better, I might have believed her. But I did know better. I wanted to call sooner, she whimpered. We don't have anywhere to go, Margot. We can't afford a new place. And no one will rent to us after the article. You've destroyed everything. I haven't destroyed anything, I said. I've only returned the damage you handed me, one bruise at a time. She sobbed harder. We're living out of a motel. Daniel sleeps in the car half the week. I haven't eaten in 2 days. The irony wasn't lost on me. Neither had I when she starved me. So, what do you want from me? I asked. Help, she whispered. Please. Just something. I'll sign anything. I'll leave forever. I'll admit everything. Just, please don't let us go hungry. I could hear her pride collapsing in her throat, choking her as she forced out each word. And it felt good. But I wasn't cruel. Not like her. So I gave her one thing. Not money. Not forgiveness. An address. A shelter for women and families 2 towns over. Run by a friend of Eleanor's. Strict rules. No lying. No manipulation. Hard labor required for residency. You go there, I said. You follow their rules. And maybe, someone will give you food you didn't have to steal from someone's plate. And Daniel, she asked. Let him sleep in the car. Then I hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I simply sat back, held my chest, and let the ache in my heart rise and fall. Because I wasn't finished. Not yet. I had one last thing to do. The final act. The part of the story where the villain begs the hero for mercy in front of a crowd. And mercy? Wasn't promised. It was time. For years, I had lived in silence, under fists, under insults, under ceilings that dripped mold and cruelty. But now, with the world whispering about what happened to me, I realized something. Whispers weren't enough. The truth didn't need to sneak anymore. It needed to roar. I sat down with a local journalist from the Sentinel Observer. Her name was Helena Reed, a calm, thoughtful woman in her early 30s who brought a notebook and a voice recorder, but more importantly, she brought respect. I want to tell it all, I told her. No censorship. No pity. Just the truth. We spoke for 4 hours. I told her about the beatings, the starvation, the humiliation. The night Claire left me to bleed on the kitchen floor, and the morning she told me to beg outside like a stray. I told her about the lies they told the neighbors. About the manipulation, the fake reports, the camera pointed at me like I was a thief in my own home. I showed her the medical reports, the texts, the letters, the bruises documented in old photos, the eviction documents that proved they were living in a home I still legally owned. I showed her everything, and then I handed her one more thing, a photo of me from the hospital, the one the nurse took when she realized I was left alone for hours, my scalp still bleeding, my lips cracked from thirst. That image said more than my voice ever could. 3 days later, the article went live. Full spread. Page 1. Headline: She called her a burden. The truth? She was her prisoner. And suddenly, silence became thunder. People were furious. Strangers messaged me, some from across the country, others from across oceans. Women in their 60s and 70s sent me emails saying, "That could have been me." Men wrote in, "My mother was treated the same way. She never lived to speak out." The story was shared by advocacy groups, elder rights activists, domestic abuse survivors. Even a few celebrities reshared it, calling it brave, haunting, and long overdue. Claire's face? It was finished. No one wanted her brand. No one wanted her apologies. She posted a shaky video trying to cry her way back into sympathy, but it didn't work. The comments were brutal. Daniel? His job let him go quietly. A press release disguised as a resignation. No one bought it. And me? I was invited to speak on a panel about elder abuse. Meet Margot Llewellyn, once told to keep quiet and mop faster, now sitting in front of a microphone, telling hundreds of people, if your family doesn't protect you, protect yourself. You are not a burden. You are not disposable. But the best part? I received a call from the police. Not to question me, but to tell me charges had officially been filed against Claire. Assault. Neglect, coercion, fraud. They had a solid case, thanks to the evidence I'd preserved. She wouldn't be going to prison just yet, but a trial was coming. And it would be public. And I'd be there, sitting in the front row, wearing red, the color she hated most. Because I had one final message left to deliver. The courtroom smelled like dust and tension. Everyone sat with stiff backs and forward eyes, as though bracing themselves for a storm, but I had lived inside that storm for years. To me, this wasn't frightening. This was freedom in progress. Claire sat at the defendant's table, her face pale, lips drawn tight, fingers twitching against the hem of her blazer. She looked smaller than I remembered, shrinking beneath the gaze of the truth. Daniel sat behind her, eyes down, his wedding ring conspicuously missing. I wondered if he pawned it or if shame had finally pried it off his finger. The prosecutor began the case. They called the nurse who found me in the emergency room. She confirmed what they saw, a frail elderly woman, alone, untreated and confused, dumped like trash on a hospital bench. Then came the neighbor, Ruth, who bravely stood up and admitted, "I saw bruises. I saw her limping." I should have said something sooner. Each testimony was a stone, quiet, heavy, irreversible. And then, they called me. "Mrs. Llewellyn," the bailiff said. I stood. My knees wobbled, not from fear, but from years of being bent in servitude. I walked slowly to the witness stand, the courtroom dead silent. Even Claire didn't breathe. I took the oath. And then I spoke. I loved them, I said. I gave them my savings. I gave them my home. I gave them everything. And in return, I was beaten. Starved. Told I was nothing. They said I was a burden. That I didn't belong. That I was lucky to have a place to sleep. I paused, my voice clear and steady, the tremble in my fingers long gone. I begged for food, in my own home. I was told to die. Told to vanish. And when I nearly did, when my body collapsed from the weight of abuse, they left me on a plastic bench in a hospital, bleeding. Like a stray dog. I turned slightly, locking eyes with Claire. "I'm not here for revenge," I said. "I'm here so no one ever suffers silently like I did. Because the worst wounds aren't the ones on your skin. They're the ones they leave inside you when they convince you that your pain is invisible." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was sacred. The judge nodded. The court reporter looked like she was holding back tears. Even the bailiff gripped the edge of the podium a little tighter. When I stepped down, I didn't cry. Claire did. For the first time, in public, she cracked. Tears rolled down her cheeks, not of remorse, but of exposure. The masks she wore had been stripped, the makeup couldn't cover the truth anymore, and the courtroom saw her for what she truly was. A predator who fed off someone too kind to fight back until that someone did. The hearing adjourned early that day. Charges were accepted. The trial would move forward. And outside, reporters crowded the steps, waiting for a quote. I gave them one. I was their servant in silence. Now I am their judge in truth. I walked through the crowd like a queen returning from exile. But I still had one more act. And this one would leave them both begging. Revenge is not always fire and fury. Sometimes it's a quiet seat at the head of a table where the people who once spat on you now ask for your approval. That's exactly what happened next. 2 weeks after the court hearing, my lawyer Eleanor forwarded me an email. It was from a staffing agency. Apparently, Daniel had been applying for jobs, any job. Marketing, clerical work, even reception. No one would touch his resume after the story went public. His name was poison. Claire, meanwhile, had tried launching a blog about healing and wellness. It had 6 followers and 3 of them were bots. But here's where it gets delicious. There's a small cafe on the edge of Whitestone, a charming place. Big windows, warm light, incredible scones. It was the only business in town still thriving because it was honest, decent, familiar. I bought it in full, quietly through a proxy. Then I changed the hiring manager to me. On my first day, I wore a soft gray coat, pearls, and a smile I hadn't worn in years. I watched from the office as applicants filed in. They had no idea whose cafe it was. I liked it that way. And then, Claire walked in. She was thinner, hollow-eyed, dressed in borrowed clothes. Her hair wasn't brushed. Her hands trembled as she held the application form. She handed it to the girl at the counter. I'm here to apply for anything. I'll wash dishes, clean floors, anything. The girl took it, walked into my office. I looked at the form. Name, Claire Llewellyn. Previous experience, homemaker, wellness coach, unpaid, private residence assistant. My mouth curled into something between pity and amusement. Daniel came in the next day, wore a tie, applied to be a cashier. He didn't look up when he handed the form over. He looked ashamed. Finally, beautifully ashamed. The moment they both left, I pinned their applications to the wall in my office. Framed them, actually. Beside a plaque that read, "We do not serve cruelty here." I never called them back. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to destroy. I didn't need to lay a single finger on them. Because the life they mocked me for, the slow, quiet, humble life, it rose. And theirs? Crashed. And here's the most perfect part. Every time they walk past my cafe, which is now the busiest place in town, they have to see my name. Etched in gold on the glass, Margot Llewellyn, owner and survivor. But I'm not done just yet, because I saved something for the day of the final verdict. The courtroom was packed the day of the final verdict. Cameras waited outside, journalists buzzed inside, and the air pulsed with anticipation. Claire sat at the defense table, pale as snow, her hair scraped back into a bun that did nothing to hide how thin she'd grown. Daniel didn't sit beside her this time. He sat behind her, silent, useless, and small. The judge entered, his expression unreadable. The room hushed like a funeral service. And then he read the words I had waited so long to hear. On the charges of elder abuse, neglect, and coercion, the court finds Claire Llewellyn guilty. The air was sucked out of the room. Claire slumped forward, her mouth hanging open in disbelief. Her lawyer placed a hand on her shoulder. She shrugged it off like a petulant child. Her entire body was shaking. But I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just breathed long and deep because for the first time in decades, I wasn't afraid of her anymore. The sentence? Community service. Fines. A permanent record. Probation for 5 years. A court-ordered ban from having legal authority over any elderly person ever again. It wasn't jail, but it was public shame. And for someone like Claire, shame was prison. Daniel didn't say a word as I left the courtroom. But I did look at him just once. His face was a storm. Embarrassed. Cornered. Weak. And beneath it all, I saw something he couldn't hide anymore. Regret. He had watched it all happen. Had let it happen. And now the world knew. But I wasn't finished. Outside, I held a press release in my hand. I read it aloud to the crowd and cameras that had gathered. I am grateful that the justice system has finally spoken for those who couldn't. But this is not just my story. This is the story of every forgotten parent, every silenced grandmother, every elder left to rot in a room while their families smile for Facebook photos. We are not burdens. We are the ones who built the floors they walk on. And now we are rising. The crowd applauded. And just when I thought the chapter had closed, a reporter asked, "Mrs. Llewellyn, what will you do now?" I smiled. Live. Loudly. And remind people what survival looks like. But I had one more gift waiting for Claire and Daniel. A final, poetic piece of revenge that they wouldn't see coming until it was too late. Something that would tear down the last thing they still believed they owned. Because the house wasn't the only thing I reclaimed. The name Llewellyn? It was never theirs to tarnish. It was mine to rebuild. My name used to be something I whispered. Margot Llewellyn, spoken behind closed lips, usually while someone else was shouting over me. In Claire's house, it became a punchline. Llewellyn the limp. Llewellyn the leech. Sometimes just the thing downstairs. But the thing about names? They hold power when you fight to make them mean something again. So I fought. With every breath, every bruise, every sleepless night, I reclaimed my name from the ashes they buried it in. The day after the verdict, I officially launched my foundation, the Llewellyn Trust. Its mission? To protect and empower the elderly. To fight abuse, neglect, abandonment. To provide shelters, legal aid, and small business grants to survivors over 60. The same day we launched, I held a press conference at the cafe I now owned. My cafe. The one Claire and Daniel once walked past with smug little grins. The same place they begged for jobs just weeks earlier. A big gold banner hung across the entrance. Llewellyn means strength. I stood before the press in a navy blue coat, silver hair pinned up with the same clip Henry gave me on our 40th anniversary. People cheered before I even opened my mouth. I told them my story openly, boldly, naming names now. I told them how Claire mocked me for being poor while stealing the roof over my head. I told them how Daniel chose silence over spine. And then I looked into the cameras and said, this name, they dragged it through the dirt. But they forgot whose name it really was. Llewellyn was my husband's name. It was my name. And it will never again be a synonym for shame. From now on, it will stand for protection, for power, for justice. For every mother who gave her last dollar and got a slap in return. The story aired in every major local network that evening. Even a national program reached out to feature me in a documentary on elder abuse survivors. Claire and Daniel saw it. I know they did, because 2 nights later, Daniel emailed me. A pathetic, trembling letter. Mom, I don't expect you to forgive us. I know I failed you. I've lost everything. Claire and I barely speak. I think she resents me now. We live in a 1-room flat with no heat. No one returns our calls. I'm so sorry. For everything. I was weak. And you were stronger than I ever knew. I didn't reply, but I printed the email, framed it, hung it next to the framed job applications in my office. Because it wasn't an apology I needed. It was a confession. And now, I had everything I needed to finish what they started. But not in revenge. In redemption. When you've lived through fire, you don't rebuild with wood and nails. You rebuild with truth. And you make damn sure it's fireproof. So I took what they tried to destroy, my dignity, my silence, my name, and I turned it into something permanent. The Llewellyn Trust didn't stay a headline. It became a movement. I bought a small, abandoned schoolhouse in the next town over, stone walls, broken windows, a place people had given up on. Just like they'd given up on me. 6 months later, after renovations and the kindness of good people, it became the Safe Hearth Center, a shelter, counseling hub, and transitional home for elderly victims of family abuse. Open doors, hot meals, legal assistance, and most importantly, a voice. Every single room was designed with care, no fluorescent hospital lights, no locked cabinets, no harsh rules barked like orders. Just peace, dignity, humanity, the very things Claire had ripped from me. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was packed. Survivors came from miles away. Families who once didn't believe in elder abuse came with flowers and tears in their eyes. They said things like, "My mother died without ever speaking her pain. Thank you for giving it a voice. You made us realize we weren't crazy. We were victims. Because of you." I left. I stood at that podium and felt something Claire and Daniel would never feel again. Purpose. Not pity. Not performance. Real purpose. The mayor shook my hand. A congresswoman asked to collaborate. Elder rights groups started quoting me. Suddenly, Margot Llewellyn was more than a cautionary tale. She was a symbol of survival, of uprising, of hope. And while I spoke to that growing crowd, I knew Claire was still in that dingy flat, watching it on a cracked TV screen. Daniel was probably behind her, staring through the window, wondering when his phone might ring again with an offer that would never come. They were prisoners now, not in cells, but in the legacy they built. a legacy of cruelty. And me? I built something better. Something lasting. Something they could never touch again. And just when I thought I'd reached the end of my story, I received a letter. One I never expected. And it came from someone I never thought I'd hear from again. The envelope was thick. Handwritten. Stamped from Edinburgh. And it smelled faintly of old books and pipe tobacco, just like Henry used to. I almost didn't open it. For a moment, I thought maybe it was another sympathy note, another stranger reaching out after reading my story. But when I saw the handwriting, his handwriting, I dropped my teacup. It was unmistakable. Bold. Leaned slightly to the left. The way he always wrote when he was trying to be careful with his words. My hands trembled as I peeled it open. Inside were 3 pages and a photo. The letter began, "My dearest Margot, if this ever reaches you, it means I've done what I never had the courage to do in life. Tell you everything. You remember Elias Thurston, my friend from the Navy? We made a pact. If something happened to either of us, the other would make sure unfinished business didn't stay buried. I didn't just leave you with memories. I left you with a legacy. And it's far bigger than the house in Sussex." My heart skipped. I flipped to the next page. I invested quietly over many years. Offshore accounts, stock dividends, land trusts, all under Elias' guidance. I never wanted you to worry again after I was gone. But I also knew our son, Daniel, might not protect you. I saw something in him toward the end. Something Claire fed. Something I was too old and too tired to confront. So I built this safety net. Not for him. Not for them. For you. Enclosed is a key to a vault in Edinburgh. In it, full access to every account, every deed, every dollar. Elias and I ensured it's all yours, no conditions. My breath caught. I turned to the last page. One more thing, love. There's a property, our old honeymoon inn on the coast of Skye. I bought it back years ago. Quietly. I restored it for you. I pictured you there in your later years. Safe. Warm. Whole. If you ever get tired of fighting, go there. Rest. You don't owe the world a war. You owe yourself peace. Yours forever, Henry, the photograph tucked inside? It was the inn. Freshly painted shutters. Ivy crawling up its stone walls. And in the corner, a porch swing. The same one we sat on 47 summers ago. I cried then. Not because I was sad, but because even from the grave, Henry protected me better than Daniel ever did in life. I thought I had reached the peak of survival, but I hadn't. There was still more. More healing, more reclaiming, more living. And I was going to take every last ounce of it. But first, I had one final stop to make. To the people who buried me in shame. To give them the truth, face to face. I stood outside the rust-colored apartment complex for a long while, just watching. The windows were cracked. Laundry hung out of place. The building smelled of mildew and desperation, the kind of scent you can't scrub out, no matter how much bleach you use. A place built for hiding, not living. They were here. Claire and Daniel. Reduced to 4 walls and flickering ceiling lights. I wasn't there to scream. I wasn't there to forgive. I was there to finish it. I knocked. The sound echoed like thunder in a place used to silence. A pause, then a shuffle of feet. And finally, the door creaked open. Claire's face appeared, gaunt, lined, and hollow-eyed. Her hair was a dull mess, her skin sallow. When she saw me, her lips parted, but no sound came out. Just a breath. A realization. Behind her, Daniel stepped into view. His shoulders sagged. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked like a man who had stopped pretending. "Mom," he whispered. I said nothing. I just walked in. They didn't stop me. Claire moved aside like a ghost parting for a storm. The apartment was pathetic. A stained couch. An overturned lamp. A cold cup of instant coffee on the windowsill. The air was thick with everything they never thought they'd breathe: failure, regret, and the scent of consequences. I sat down in their only chair. They stood like children in detention. Then I spoke. You called me a burden. You left me in a hospital to rot. You made me beg for food. And when I bled, you laughed. Claire lowered her head. Daniel closed his eyes. You didn't break me, I continued. You rebuilt me. Stronger. Louder. Braver. Daniel stepped forward. Mom, I'm sorry. I should have. Stop, I said flatly. You had your chance. Many chances. He froze. I didn't come here for apologies, I said. I came here to say goodbye. Claire's voice cracked. Goodbye? I stood. Calm. Whole. I'm leaving, I said. For the coast. For peace. For Henry. And I'll never look back. They stared, too stunned to speak. But before I go, I added, pulling a small folded card from my coat pocket, I want you to see this. I handed it to Claire. Her hands shook as she opened it. It was an invitation to the grand opening of the Llewellyn home for survivors of domestic abuse. Her lips parted in horror. You used our name? I smiled. No, I said. I reclaimed it. And then I walked out. No tears. No hugs. No more explanations. Just silence. And behind me? 2 people left with nothing but their shame. The same shame they once tried to drown me in. The road to Skye was long and winding, fog curling like fingers around the cliffs, wind humming through the heather fields like the breath of time itself. I traveled alone. No assistants, no reporters, no cameras. Just me, and Henry's memory riding beside me. The sun was just beginning to dip when I saw it. The inn. Our inn. Stone walls weathered but strong. A blue door with polished brass handles. The porch swing, gently swaying in the wind like it had been waiting for me all these years. And above it all, the carved wooden sign still hung, exactly as we'd seen it on our honeymoon, the Silver Nest. I parked, stepped out, and for a moment, I couldn't move. Because for the first time in what felt like centuries, I wasn't fighting. I was arriving. The caretaker, a kind older man named Fergus, greeted me at the door. Miss Llewellyn, he said warmly, tipping his cap. Your husband left this place for you just the way you'd remember it. He handed me the keys. I clutched them to my chest. Inside, it smelled of cedar and clean linen. The fireplace crackled as if it had been burning in welcome for days. The walls held warmth, not secrets. Every detail was familiar. Safe. Loved. I walked the halls, touched the worn banister we once leaned against, laughing over cheap wine. In the bedroom, a small framed note sat on the nightstand. For every night I couldn't be there, may this place hold you instead. Henry I wept then, not from pain, not from sorrow, but from the overwhelming fullness of coming home. I wasn't a victim anymore. Not a survivor. Not even a warrior. I was simply Margot, the woman who lived, the woman who outlasted the cruelty, the woman who had built something indestructible from the ashes of what they tried to burn. I spent the evening in silence, watching the waves crash along the rocky shore. The stars overhead blinked like old friends, and the swing creaked beside me, its rhythm steady and soft. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in decades. Not out of relief, but out of freedom. Because tomorrow, I would wake up not to fight, but simply to live. It was months later. The spring wind danced through the daffodils blooming outside the Silver Nest. I had made a life here, quiet, calm, unshakable. The inn had become my sanctuary. The porch swing had become my church. Peace had finally become my partner. But the past has a funny way of knocking, even when you've changed the locks. It was just after noon when I heard it, a hesitant knock at the door. Not firm, not demanding, timid, almost ashamed. I opened it slowly, and there they were. Claire, Daniel. They looked thinner, paler, smaller. The fire in Claire's eyes had burned out, leaving only the hollow smoke of defeat. Daniel held a crumpled envelope in one hand and a duffel bag in the other. His collar was frayed. His eyes were red. For a moment, none of us said anything. Then Claire did something I never imagined I'd see. She dropped to her knees. "Please," she whispered. "We're not here to beg for money. We didn't know where else to go." Daniel stood frozen, staring at the floor. I leaned against the doorway. "Why now?" I asked calmly. "We read the article about the safe hearth," Daniel muttered. "We saw the photos. The people you helped. We thought maybe I'd help you too." I finished for him. Claire looked up, her face streaked with shame. "Not help. Just listen. Just see us. We lost everything." I exhaled slowly, the ocean breeze brushing my face. "I gave you everything once," I said. "And you spit on it. On me. You buried me in silence." "We know," Daniel said. "We'll carry it for the rest of our lives." Good. They needed to. But something in me, something Henry had always loved, refused to be cruel in return. "You're not coming in," I said gently. "But I'll give you this." I reached into my coat pocket and handed them a pamphlet. It read, "The Llewellyn Trust Intake Shelter. No judgment, just rules. All are welcome. Even the fallen. Especially the fallen." Claire took it like it was the last thing she deserved. Because maybe it was. "You'll have to follow every rule," I said. "No special treatment. No excuses. No shortcuts." Daniel nodded, eyes glistening. "And if you break even one of them," I added, "I will personally make sure you're turned away at the door. Understand?" They both whispered yes. Then they turned to leave. Before the path curved out of sight, Daniel turned back. "Mom," he called, voice barely holding. I didn't answer. Just stood in the doorway. Do you still hate me?" I smiled softly. "No," I said. "I don't hate you. But I no longer need you." And I closed the door, not in anger, not in vengeance, but in peace. Because survival isn't just about rising. It's about knowing when to walk away and when to let them crawl back into the light on your terms.